Check that. Florida Senator and presidential candidate Marco Rubio. Almost put you in retirement there for a moment. How you doing?
Good.
Good morning to you. We're about to see this image. You've talked about it a lot. How do you feel today?
You know who's not going to be there? All these people in Cuba that are fighting for freedom and democracy. Fighting meaning they take to the streets, they protest, they're rounded up, arrested, and beaten. None of them was invited to this event. And by the way, when they raised the Cuban flag in Washington, there were a bunch of people there from all over the country that are in favor of the Castro regime. They were shouting Viva Fidel. But when it comes to the U.S. flag raising in Havana, not a single dissident, not a single person who opposes the Castro government in Havana was invited to this. And what that shows you is what this is all about. This is a unilateral change. We are going to open up to Cuba, but Cuba's not going to open up to us, to their own people, or to the world. It's a one-sided deal, and that's why it's such a bad idea.
But you know the policy is marching forward, and the change between these two countries is marching forward as well. Well, do you stop that?
Yeah.
I mean, if you were to be in the White House, what would you do?
You know, people forget we have an existing law that governs our relationship with Cuba. It's called the Cuba Democracy Act, and it says, in order for U.S. policy to change, the Cubans must make changes too. As president, I would impose that policy. I would enforce the existing law passed by Congress in the 90s that requires reciprocal changes on the part of the Cubans. I would not have recognized them diplomatically. When I'm president, we won't. That we won't have an embassy in Cuba. I would not diplomatically recognize an illegitimate government.
You're saying then you would reverse this policy?
Absolutely.
You would shut down the embassy if you were in the Oval Office?
Well, that building where that embassy is housed was the U.S. interest section. It's been there for decades. In essence, the building would remain, but it wouldn't be the title of embassy, because an embassy is reserved for countries that we have diplomatic relations with. We shouldn't have diplomatic relations with an anti-American communist dictatorship that oppresses its own people, harbors fugitives of American justice, including a cop killer from New Jersey, and gives the Russians and the Chinese a base of operations to spy electronically against us.
This is more than technical. You would take the word embassy off of that building,
Absolutely.
Just to be clear.
Absolutely.
Now, the administration argues, listen, we've been doing this dance for more than 50 years, and where has it gotten the Cuban people?
Well, first, that's a great question for the Cuban government, because we're changing our policies, but they've openly said they're not changing theirs. Not only openly said it, but repeatedly said it. In fact, just 2 days ago, Fidel Castro, or someone writing in his name, published this article where he wrote that the United States must now pay Cuba millions of dollars in reparations for the damage done by the embargo, and that's absurd. And of course, but he does that on purpose. The signal he's sending the Cuban people is, it's great that the American flag is flying over here, but don't expect any changes. We're still anti-American, and we're still a dictatorship.
You just came off a major speech here in New York City. Just 20 minutes ago, that concluded. Yes. Part of what you said is that the president has been quick to deal with the oppressors, but slow to deal with the oppressed. His excuses are paper thin.
Right. Where's the oppressed in Cuba today? Not a single dissident was invited to this event, not a single member of civil society. People who have risked their lives, have been beaten, jailed, indefinitely detained. Not one of them will be at this today, and there's no excuse for it.
On Iran, too, if you were president, you will give the mullahs a choice. These are your words now. Either you have an economy or you have a nuclear program. You cannot have both. On Iran, what would you do? Because that policy is marching forward.
Well, we would reimpose U.S. sanctions on Iran. That's existing law. It's the law we have in the books today. And in fact, not only would we reimpose those sanctions, we would increase them. And the choice for Iran will be very simple. As long as you're enriching uranium or reprocessing plutonium, we will have sanctions on your economy that will cost you billions of dollars. And if you try to build a weapon, you will be hit militarily. That is the only option until Iran comes to its senses or its leadership is replaced.
I have not had a chance to talk to you since Chuck Schumer made his announcement. He's not going to support it. Does this deal, as it stands today, can it be strong enough and have the votes to override a veto?
Well, here's what I'm confident of. We're going to have a majority of the House and Senate vote against it. I believe we'll pass the 60-vote threshold in the Senate that we need to get over a filibuster.
Can you get 70?
What I don't know is whether we can get to 67. Chuck Schumer obviously is a big deal as a Democrat who's chosen to be a statesman in this case instead of a partisan. Will other Democrats join him? I hope so, because as I've told my Democratic colleagues, you will live with your vote on this for the rest of your career, and you will have to explain it for the rest of your lives. And in 10 years, if Iran has a nuclear weapon and a long-range missile capable of hitting the United States, in essence, if in 10 years Iran has become what North Korea is today, your vote will have to be answered for.
Wow. On Hillary Clinton, you've looked at classified material online, correct?
Yeah, well, not online, but I'm on the Intelligence Committee. We review it every day.
You've seen an email, right? Is there any way that there could be confusion about what is classified and what is not?
No. As a member of the Intelligence Committee, the first thing, when you see a classified document, it is very clearly marked, and it has all sorts of acronyms associated with it, but basically you can see whether it's a classified information. And you know that you can't take that out of a certain place. You can't remove it from what they call a SCIF, which is this secure area that is protected from electronic eavesdropping. And you most certainly know you shouldn't be talking about it or passing it on in an email, particularly to a private server like the one she had. What they did is reckless. It's complete recklessness and incompetence.
Is what they did, or she did, or someone on her team a crime?
If someone, when it took a classified document, erased the classification that was on it, removed it so it didn't look like it was classified, and passed it on, they committed a crime.
I want you to stand by, okay? We're waiting for this event to start. Marco Rubio here in studio. More with the Florida Senator in a moment. Back to Havana, watching history, waiting for the flag to rise there. Florida Senator, presidential candidate Marco Rubio. We continue our discussion here in studio. We have 2 more minutes to talk here. Your mother is 85. She lives in Miami. How does she feel watching this today?
You know, it's for a lot of people in the historic exile community, people that grew up in the era that have had to experience the 60s and the loss of their country, the inability to go back in the case of my parents. It's a bitter moment because nothing's changed in Cuba. It's almost like the U.S. has surrendered. We've now agreed, fine, Castroism gets to stay. That's the feeling. And, you know, if this was part of a change in our policies in exchange for a change in Cuban policies, that would be one thing. But this is a unilateral change. We are changing towards Cuba. Cuba's not changing towards us, and it's not changing towards its people. So it feels like totally one-sided. It almost feels like we are accepting that the Cuban people forever will have to live under a repressive government.
We're getting a strong reaction out of Miami throughout the day today, as you well know. Donald Trump is the Republican front-runner as we stand today. Is he fit to be president?
Well, as I said, he's another candidate in this field, and I obviously believe I'm more qualified and better able to serve our country than he is. That's why I'm running. That's why we're going to have a campaign. And in the process of this campaign, every candidate's going to have to answer that question, both in how they deal with the issues, how they hold and comport themselves, and how they deal with others. So that's the challenge he faces. We all face that. And that's why having debates on national television is important. Voters can make up their mind. But I have chosen to focus on my message. I'm talk about what I stand for, what I'm going to do for America, and I'm going to let the voters in the Republican Party decide who they want their nominee to be.
You go to Iowa on Monday.
I do.
I'm looking forward to it. How do you feel about where you are today?
I feel positive about it.
We have seen Ben Carson get a bump out of last Thursday. We've seen Carly Fiorina get a significant bump.
Yeah, I feel very positive about where we are. We got a lot of positive feedback after the debate last Thursday. And now that voters are going to begin to pay more careful attention, especially in the early states, and they start to learn about the candidates and what we're going to do, we feel really good about where we are. It's a lot of hard work, but we're looking forward to it. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you for making part of your day with us.
Thank you.
Making time. Thank you, Senator Marco Rubio.
Thank you.
See you on the trail, okay?
Yep.
Here in studio as we watch the flag, moments away. Clearly they're behind just a little bit there in Havana, but we're watching it now. Julie.